Thank you very much, it's a great pleasure to share a stage this evening with Julia Tymoshenko, who is so recognizably to the outside world a representative of the Ukrainian people. She's not somebody who has had an easy time. She was Prime Minister of Ukraine, but she also served in prison for her beliefs in Ukraine as well. And now everyone in Ukraine, all the political factions are united behind the effort to drive the Russians from the territories and to defeat the invasion. And I would also like to underline what she said about the global gratitude to Romania for what Romania has done at this time in the face of Russian aggression, in terms, first of all, of the hospitality and welcome given to Ukrainian refugees, the amount of effort that has been put into helping them and the people of Ukraine, but also the amount of military assistance provided by this member of NATO in this country to the fighting forces in Ukraine itself. I was asked this evening to come along and talk about the future, whether or not we could re-establish the global rules-based order which Vladimir Putin has damaged, but not destroyed, and what is to be put in its place. And Julia Tymoshenko has posed a number of major issues before not just NATO, but the world community as a whole. But we're not going to easily foresee the future while the fighting is still going on. I'm reminded of that old joke from the Soviet Union where the Communist Party kept rewriting the history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, so that the joke was, in our country it is easy to forecast the future, but it's very difficult to forecast the past. But we, of course, find it difficult to forecast the future, and especially when there is a war going on of huge intensity. NATO was created in 1949 based on the basic common security principle of an attack on one country is to be seen as an attack on all countries. And at that time, it was seen that the enemy was the Soviet Union, and the attack was likely to come across the Fulda Gap on the North German plains. The front line now for all of us is the muddy fields of the Donbass in eastern Ukraine. That's our front line at the moment. But the NATO security guarantee changed again in 2001, when I was the first person in NATO's history to invoke that self-defense clause of Article 5 of the Atlantic Treaty. An attack on the United States of America was to be seen as an attack on all 18 other countries in the alliance. And yet now we're faced with another challenge, this time not of global terrorism, but of a nuclear weapon state attacking its neighbor, attempting to change the borders of a country by the use of force, and forcing the countries of NATO to run essentially a proxy war by helping Ukraine to defend itself against the aggression of the Russian Federation. Leon Trotsky, one of the pioneers of the Russian Revolution, once, in another context completely, said this, and I think it should be remembered today. He said, "You might not be interested in this war, but this war is interested in you." And we should be under no illusions at all. As State Secretary Fota said, the Ukrainians are fighting for us today. We're involved in this fight. Those of us in the privileged West, with our security and with our rules-based order, we are in this fight because the Ukrainians are fighting for us as well. But this has been, for the Europeans, for all of us, a wake-up call. Maybe belated, but the combination of Vladimir Putin's aggression and indeed the presidency of Donald Trump has forced the Europeans, perhaps for the first time since the end of the Cold War, to face the reality that they need to do more in their own defense. And that's the first wake-up call on defense, the need for us as Europeans to be prepared to do more, to spend more on defense, to build more defense capabilities, and to have more of our capabilities at high readiness levels. We've got to learn that we cannot and should not, in any event, be depending all the time on the United States of America for our security. The third wake-up call is the fact that the global South, Africa, India, South America, does not see this conflict in the same way as we do. But they should. If the principle is accepted that borders can be changed by the use of force, then nobody in the world will be safe. Africa and its borders, Latin America and its borders, India and its conflict with its neighbors and disputed borders, they've got a dog in this particular fight. This is not a regional argument between two nation states. It is a nuclear weapon state using nuclear blackmail, the weaponization of energy, in order to achieve a change in its borders as well. So we must continue to help Ukraine in its fight to make sure that Vladimir Putin, who I did good business with during my time in NATO, where we created together the NATO-Russia Council and all the working parties that went along with it, where I stood on a platform like today with Vladimir Putin beside me and heard him say these words: Ukraine is an independent nation state which will make its own decisions about its own security. The 28th of May 2002, these were his words, shortly after he signed the Rome Declaration, alongside me and the other 19 nations on the NATO-Russia Council, which obligated those who signed it to defend the integrity and the independence of all existing European nation states. But Putin has changed in the meantime, and frankly, we must change Putin as well. And finally, a lot of people in this room are involved in business and in commerce. All of you affected by the weaponization of energy, the weaponization of the wheat supplies, which largely come from Russia today, and from the destabilization of our system by what's happening in Ukraine. And most people ask me, as if I should know, how is it going to end? You asked that in the last panel. Now, I don't know how it's going to end. All I can say is that one man can make the decision. And as one of my successors in NATO said, if Russia stops fighting, there will be peace. If Ukraine stops fighting, there will be no Ukraine. So one man can make that decision. And will he make that decision? Well, let me just briefly say, some 2 weeks ago, President Xi Jinping of China, overnight changed the lockdown rules that applied in his country, draconian rules on lockdown, because he felt the ground was moving under him. 2 weeks ago, the supreme leader in Iran, released 22,000 prisoners, women who had been demonstrating in the streets against the torture of one of the women demonstrators, because he felt that the ground was moving under him and the regime was in danger. And in 1979, the mighty Soviet Union withdrew the whole of the Red Army from Afghanistan without a get-out clause, without an off-ramp. They felt they were losing. They felt they were losing money and losing people, and overnight they decided they were coming out of Afghanistan. If the West remains solid, if this remarkable unity that Vladimir Putin got wrong continues, if we continue to supply the weaponry that the Ukrainians need to defend themselves, and if globally we recognize that we are part of the battle that is going on, then the ground will assuredly move under the feet of Vladimir Putin. And that will be the best possible outcome of this particular war. Thank you very much.